Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cherry Mac. Thanks for joining me and thank you so much for being part of this channel. It's been a while since I shooted a video. I remember last time I was not at home, but now I'm here back at home. Yeah, it's been honestly a while. I thought I would shoot videos consistently, but apparently there have been a lot of changes, and that has led me to not shooting my videos consistently. But guys, I'm going to go back and I will try my very best to be very consistent and continue uploading regularly as I used to in the previous times. So, without wasting much time, let's get started. Once again, I want to acknowledge everybody who have been subscribing to this channel. I want to say once again, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so blessed to have you guys. We already are at 1000 subscribers as we speak now, and I'm so glad that everybody who has been coming along with me, who started the journey with me, and everybody who is subscribing to this channel, and everybody who's benefiting from this channel. I'm so happy and so proud of everyone. I want to say once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Feel appreciated from my side, and let's continue keeping the fire burning. And yeah, now we're going to go, and it's gonna be a continuation of the last video. I uploaded a few traditional Kikuyu common foods that were very common in our traditional homes, and this is just a continuation of the video. So let's get started. Get yourself comfortable, get yourself a cup of tea, a cup of water, or anything, or if get yourself this cold drink as I have here with me. Apparently this is not anything to do with alcohol. It's just a simple chilled mocktail I made by myself. So get yourself comfortable and let's get started. mm. Cheers guys, cheers. Wow. Now guys, the first thing we're going to speak about, or the first traditional foods that we're going to look at today, is potatoes. Potatoes are very, very, very common, not only in the Kikuyu society, but I think almost in every country, or in any culture, potatoes are always common. So the same thing applies to the Kikuyu society. We see that potatoes are a very, very common traditional food that dates back in the days. And and not to forget, the name of potatoes in Kikuyu, how we call them, is waru. Waru. If you hear somebody speaking about waru, definitely you know they are speaking about potatoes. So waru refers to potatoes. Now, there are many types of potatoes. We have a lot of types and many different potatoes in the Kikuyu society, or even in the traditional Kikuyu uh, home. But I'm not going to go deeper into that. We're just going to generalize and stick into the stick stick ourselves in the general term potatoes. Now, remember, the Kikuyu people were farmers, and so with that they produced a lot of food through farming, and potatoes were one of those things that they really produced, and they farmed a lot and a lot of potatoes that would feed the family. So that's why potatoes or waru were very, very common. Now, potatoes were prepared in very different ways. For example, they were roasted. We have potatoes that were boiled. We have potatoes that were stewed. We even have potatoes that were mashed. Remember, I mentioned earlier before in the previous video that we had mokimo, and potatoes were one essential ingredient in this common dish known as mokimo, which is basically mashed potatoes with bananas, with beans, or whatever kind of vegetable that one had in the house. But then they were mashed, they were roasted, they were stewed, and I think those were the common ways of preparing potatoes. Now, in the Kikuyu traditional home, potatoes were served for breakfast. Generally, you would have eaten them boiled and eaten them with tea, or roasted, eaten and eaten them with tea as well. Remember, in the Kikuyu traditional home, there was nothing like bread, there was nothing like sausage, there was nothing like cheese. The only thing that we had in the Kikuyu breakfast were this kind of food that were mostly eaten even in the evening. So most of the people preferred or ate food that was left from the previous night, and that's why you see people ate potatoes for breakfast, because most probably they were leftovers from the previous night, and that is what was served for breakfast. So generally they would be eaten for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, or even as a snack. Just roasted like that, added some salt to flavor, and just eaten. Or mashed down with some peas and made into mokimo. Or stewed together with other vegetables like peas, like bananas, like green vegetables, and so on and so forth. And this covers up the potatoes. Now, okay, in our day-to-day life, currently we have potatoes in as chips, or as as fries. So times have really changed, and we see that people serve potatoes mostly like fries or chips, whatever you call them. But this was not the case in the previous times. The only thing that I covered is that what people used to do in the previous days or in the traditional Kikuyu home. Now, the next thing we cover today is the next thing we cover is peas. Peas is green peas, or I think most people call them peas. Now, in the Kikuyu language, we call them Minji. Minji were very, very common in the Kikuyu traditional home. They were used to make vegetables, to make mokimo, which I have already I've continued mentioning in every kind in this video. They were made for stew and many other things. So if you hear anybody speaking about Minji, you know they are talking about peas, which was very, very common. Now, peas were not the ones. Okay, people, the Kikuyu people harvested peas, and they were already in that, I think they are already, I don't know how you call that, it's like a pond something. So they harvested them from that pond and prepared them by themselves with their hands. There was nothing like frozen peas or canned peas. There was nothing like that. Everything was organic and fresh from the garden or from the fields. So the peas basically just came directly from the field or from the garden. They were either consumed dry or fresh or green, thus calling them Minji Nyomo. Minji Nyomo. Minji Nyomo are dried peas. We also have the green peas that are still young and, you know, crunchy. They are called Minji Joa. Minji Joa. Minji Nyomo. Minji Joa. Minji Joa are the young, crunchy, and fresh peas. Minji Nyomo are the ones that were dried. Basically, what they did was drying them under the sun, which they did right from home. Now, the Minji were prepared, uh, they were done, okay, they were prepared through boiling, stewing, or just, I think those were the only methods that were used to prepare the minji or the peas, through boiling or stewing them with some oil and adding some other vegetables to make a certain sauce or a certain vegetable, yeah, a certain vegetable stew. So this is how minjis were prepared. Actually, the right name was to make something like a stir fry kind of a serving. So the other thing that we see, minji was served on lunch time and also on dinner time. And the other thing we see is minji was also very common in the common Kikuyu traditional ceremonies, namely weddings, funerals, naming ceremonies, ritual ceremonies, and many other ceremonies. You will see that even today that minji or peas are still dominant in those Kikuyu dishes, and that's being a very common vegetable in the Kikuyu traditional culture. Now, the other thing we're going to see is milk. Now, you might be wondering why I'm mentioning milk, because it's not some kind of food. It falls under the category of beverages or drinks, but then it's still a very essential food for us human beings. And we know that milk is very rich in calcium, and it's one of those foods that is consumed right from birth. So milk was also a very common food in the traditional Kikuyu food. We have already seen that the Kikuyu did a lot of farming. With that, they did a lot of cattle herding. They kept livestock. They kept goats and many other animals. So through the livestock herding or the herding of cattle, they would produce milk right from the cows, or through the sheep or goats keeping. They would also farm the sheep milk or goat milk, which is very healthy in our system. So Milk was also a very common food in our traditional Kikuyu homes. Milk is basically called iria. Iria. If you hear someone speaking about milk, just say iria. Iria is milk. So this is how we call milk in Kikuyu. Now, milk was prepared through boiling. Now, the thing is, after you harvested milk from the cows, or you milked the goats or the sheep, or you milked the cow, the milk was brought to boiling to kill the germs, and thereafter it was consumed. It was either consumed raw without anything, or it was used to make tea, which is called shai. And the method that the Kenyans or the Kikuyu people used to make tea was basically boiling milk, adding some water, which I think is the ratio of milk to water is 1:2. I mean, 1 cup of milk for 2 cups of water. And then there was, after that was brought to a boil, they added some tea leaves, which is black tea leaves, and that came up with shai or tea, or basically black tea, which is very different from the tea that people consume in the Western culture. Now, the other thing that was done is milk was also added to porridge. I mentioned earlier before that we have porridge, which is called oshoro. Now, milk was just a very essential thing that was just added to porridge to put some flavor, or just to add some other health benefit of milk in the porridge. And milk was basically consumed for breakfast, for lunch, or even for dinner. Remember, there were no many varieties of drinks back in the days. So in the morning, people would have, the lucky ones would either consume milk, raw milk, or in the at lunchtime they would also consume milk with potatoes, sweet potatoes, arrowroot, and so on and so forth. Or in the evening, people also would go for milk while serving ugali. So those who didn't have vegetables, they either took ugali, which is some mixture of white corn flour, and consumed that together with milk. And there was this specific milk that was more delicious while eating the ugali. And this is a component of milk, or a product that comes from milk, which is directly translated to buttermilk, or fermented milk, or sour milk. And the name of that is iriaimata. Iriaimata. Iriaimata is fermented milk, or buttermilk, or milk that is no longer good. So this is the other kind of milk that traditional Kikuyu people consumed, and was very, very, very common in the traditional home. Now, mostly milk was preserved for babies, for young kids, and even for other members of the family. Remember, people are not very rich back in the days, and so since the babies or the young kids had no many, they didn't have a variety of things to feed on, so most of the food that they were given, or they were fed, for example, if a woman prepared mashed potatoes for the baby or for the kids, she would have added some milk into it, just to make the food a little bit more flavory or light to digest. Or if they prepared pumpkins or bananas, the thing is they would have added some milk into that food for the babies or for the children or for the young kids, just to make it add, to make it have a little bit flavor, or make it a bit lighter or easier to digest. Remember, the foods were very dry. So this brings us to the end of everything to do with milk. Now, the other thing we see, we will cover is meat. Now, meat, nobody would have thought that meat was a very, very common food back in the days. But then meat was there before and before, and it dates back to before Christ and so on and so forth. So meat is basically known as nyama. Now we see that most of the Kikuyu people back in the days were farmers, and they also did a lot of hunting. That means the men who went outside there hunting, they hunted for meat, and the meat was used to feed the family. And this is why we see that meat was a very, very common food back in the days and even today. And in the Kikuyu society, meat has a very important function in most of the ceremonies that we have. For example, in Rurashio, which is the dowry payment, or even in weddings and many other occasions, meat was that kind of food that brought people together, and it was a sign of togetherness and holding each other. And that's why we even see in the circumcision, or when the boys got circumcised, in that ritual circumcision festival, there was also slaughtering of an animal, just to show that something has happened, or it was a sign of the occasion, or binding up together, or a covenant. I think the right word to use here is, it was something to do with a covenant, an agreement. And that's why we see meat, or nyama, was very, very common in every Kikuyu home, or every traditional Kikuyu home. Even today, meat is still one of those common foods that we will never miss in any traditional Kikuyu home. Now, meat was basically prepared through boiling, roasting, grilling, barbecuing, or cooked together for stew, and many other methods. But those were the most common ones. Now, meat was either served alone or served with vegetables. It would be consumed even for breakfast in the morning. With that, I mean, when there was a function, let's say for example there was a ceremony going on last night, and people had slaughtered a cow or a bull or a goat or any kind of an animal, the meat that was left over, people would consume that meat right in the morning or for breakfast. The other thing, meat was also consumed in during lunchtime and also during dinner. So we see that meat dominated in our Kikuyu traditional home, and even in most of our meals. Now, one thing I want to teach you guys, there is a very common sausage that is also found in every or almost every traditional Kikuyu home or in Kenya. And the name for this sausage is motura. Motura basically is a kind of sausage that was from a slaughtered animal, and they stuffed some meat inside to make a certain kind of sausage. It's also very very common even today. So if you hear anybody speaking about motura, you just know it's some kind of a sausage or sausage made from meat or made from stuffed meat. It's very very delicious, and it's also very very common in our traditional Kikuyu homes and even in the modern Kikuyu homes. Now the other thing I'm going to teach you from, also derived from meat, is soup, which also was very common even today. Soup basically was called dufu. Dufu. Now, soup. This is the kind of special soup that was derived from the meat or right from the slaughtered animal and made into some soup, or the bones or the kind of meat that they removed from the animal was prepared specially, and it was made to a soup also known as dufu. It was consumed basically anytime, whether in the morning, during lunchtime, or even during dinner time. I find soup or dufu very delicious, and it suits exactly when it's very cold, because it gives you some kind of warmth, and it's somehow very fatty. So when it's very cold and one is given soup or dufu, it makes one feel very warm, and that kind of fat that one consumes from the soup, it also helps one from freezing or from shivering from the cold. So dufu was also a very very common end product from meat. And the other thing we see is motura, which I also mentioned is the sausage. So this brings me to the end of meat. Now we are going to continue, and the other thing we are going to see is we also had vegetables. Vegetables which were very 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 common in our Kikuyu traditional homes. Remember, we consumed a lot of organic foods and healthy stuff, so among them were vegetables. So the name that we give to vegetables is boga. Boga is the general term for vegetables, be it white vegetables, black vegetables, green vegetables. The general term for that is boga. Boga. Now, with vegetables, we have different kind of vegetables. There are so many kinds, but I'm just going to mention a few that are very common. And the number one here is dhokoma. Dhokoma are basically sukuma wiki in Kiswahili, or kales, or other people call them collards. So dhokoma were kales. The other thing we have is kafishi. Kafishi is basically cabbage, which also falls under vegetables. The next one we have is managu. Managu are, I don't know how we call managu, but are also under vegetables that were very common in the Kikuyu traditional home and consumed even till to date. But if you know the name for managu, please feel free and write down the comment section. The other common vegetable we had is terere. terere. Terere also was very, very common. I also do not have the English translation, so if you have it, please feel free and write it down in the comment section. And the other common vegetables we had is doroko, which are very delicious and very nutritious. Also very common in our Kikuyu traditional home and consumed a lot. They were used basically to accompany those the other foods um, like warus, which you have already seen. They are called potatoes. They were used to accompany nyama, which we have already seen is called meat, and many other options. So vegetables were accompaniments for all other foods that I've already mentioned in the previous video and even previously. So vegetables were prepared mostly through boiling. They were also prepared through stewing or frying them, and also mixed together with potatoes, beans, or even green bananas, cooked bananas, etc. So yeah, this is how vegetables were prepared. Now we're going to continue and we are going to look at pumpkins. Pumpkins were also a very common essential Kikuyu food, and the name for pumpkins is marege. Marege were pumpkins. They were prepared through boiling. They were also mashed after boiling and made into irio or puree or mokimo. Nowadays, I see people making pumpkins, using pumpkin to make chapatis, but that was not the case back in the days. Basically, the pumpkins were eaten boiled, stewed, or just I think those were the methods that were used to prepare the pumpkins. They were mostly consumed for breakfast, for lunch, and also for dinner. I find it very nutritious. For me, for example, I had many were the times when we consumed pumpkins on breakfast time. We just consumed that. Instead of having bread, we just took the pumpkins, salted them a little bit, and consumed them together with tea, which is very nutritious.